Buenos días, buenas tardes, good morning, good afternoon, good night, dependiendo del lugar donde se encuentren. Mi nombre es Heidi Mosquera, soy cofundadora de la ONG Ubuntu, una ONG pionera en espacios de sanación afrocentrada e intersección entre el racismo y la salud y los derechos humanos. Les damos la cordial bienvenida a este evento paralelo titulado La intersección del racismo, la salud y la sanación, una perspectiva basada en el trauma sobre la transformación de sistemas para personas afrodescendientes, realizado por la ONG Ubuntu y coorganizado por Ubuntu King Lions Public Relations y ONG ONECA. Este evento paralelo forma parte de la programación del cuarto periodo de secciones del Foro Permanente de los Afrodescendientes de la ONU, que se celebra esta semana en la ciudad de Nueva York. Informamos que este evento se llevará a cabo en dos secciones. La primera sección será presentada por King's Linux Public Relations y tenemos un receso de 15 minutos para luego la segunda sección presentada por la ONG Ubuntu. Estamos en un momento crucial para reflexionar sobre la relación entre racismo, salud mental y derechos humanos. Este evento paralelo es clave para abordar el impacto del racismo estructural en la salud física, mental y emocional desde una perspectiva basada en el trauma. Desde la ONG Ubuntu hemos defendido la importancia de investigar de forma integral cómo el racismo afecta la salud física, mental y emocional de todos los afrodescendientes y de la diáspora africana. Abogamos por transformar los sistemas desde el cuidado y la reparación alineados a los principios fundamentales del foro: justicia reparadora para África y las personas afrodescendientes, derechos de mujeres y niñas afrodescendientes, políticas públicas con enfoque de derechos humanos y lucha contra el racismo sistémico. Además, promovemos el debate sobre la inteligencia artificial, justicia digital, buscando tecnologías que fomenten la equidad racial. Hoy contaremos con la modelación de Cristel Fanfan, licenciada en Pedagogía por la Universidad Federal de la Frontera Sur de Brasil. Es presidenta regional de IPPDR en Brasil, donde trabaja en derechos humanos y en la protección de mujeres y jóvenes. Además, apoya a la comunidad haitiana en Brasil, promoviendo la educación como clave para la libertad. Ha presentado proyectos en la ONU y pronunciará un discurso en los próximos meses, un discurso mundial sobre el empoderamiento de la mujer en julio del 2025. Gracias, Cristel, por estar aquí. Te damos paso.
Many thanks to Ubuntu Kissing Lines Public Relations in ONECA for generating this space for conversation. It is a real pleasure for me to moderate this space, present the sessions, and our guests. The first session will be led by Kissing Lion Public Relations, Keshana Evans, a member of the New York State Trauma Informed Network and Research Center, NYSTINRC. Advisory Board will present scalable approaches to trauma-informed transformation, leadership, and action, highlighting what we can learn about the statewide impact of NYSTINRC, a grant-funded initiative of the New York State Office of Mental Health. In addition, she will present community building through communications, a unique framework and strategy for supporting corporate citizenship through a trauma-informed lens and building resilience. In a few words, let me introduce Keshana Evans. Keshana Evans is a consultant specializing in trauma-informed resilient communities, a member of the advisory board of the New York State Trauma-Informed Research Center and Network, and senior strategist at Kissing Lion. With extensive experience in diverse industries, including communications and nonprofits, she has worked as a trauma-informed expert and training facilitator for public and private sectors. In addition, Keshana has a notable background in entertainment, having worked with high-profile brands such as HBO and BET, and was an associate producer on an award-winning independent film. She founded her own communication consultancy to support emerging experts and brands in areas such as culture, arts, technology, and wellness. Passionate about human rights and social transformation, Keshina has spoken at major summits and events on resilience and trauma-informed and has been quoted in outlets such as Mashable and the New York Times. We remind you that you can make your comments on the Ubuntu S YouTube channel chat. We will have a dedicated section to answer them. Thanks for joining us today. Bringing on Keshena event.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. While I open the screen here, I invite our watchers to be comfortable and to consume today responsibly. Wonderful. I'm so grateful to be here. I'll begin by saying Ubuntu, I am because we are. Thank you for joining today's session, Community Building Through Communications, Systems Transformation for Leaders of African Descent. I'd like to open by acknowledging and welcoming excellencies and esteemed leaders of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, including Madam Chair June Sumer and Gaynell Curry. I would also like to acknowledge esteemed leaders of the Working Group of Experts of People of African Descent and the International Civil Society Working Group. And of course, Ubuntu S, our host, and Onika, ONG. I'd like to thank moderator and regional president of the IPPDR in Brazil, Cristel Fanfan, for your powerful human rights work and the empowerment of women and youth and supporting the Haitian community in Brazil. Throughout today's presentation, I invite guests to actively use the chat box, including questions and ideas you have that are specific or related to today's session. My colleague, Manny Portillo, will also engage there in the live stream chat box. A few notes before I begin. Today's presentation objectives include introducing learning and development and capacity building solutions for leaders, discussing healing-centered cultural and cross-cultural community building and organizing strategies, provide an example leadership path from vulnerable youth to trauma-informed change agent and consciousness leader. You should have the ability to toggle for language. If you have any difficulties, please share any information or troubles in the chat box, and our team will do their best to make sure you are having the proper translations. As a few notes before we begin, I'd like to encourage participants to think about actionable, measurable steps. Some of today's presentation may mention topics relating to violence. Please practice self-care and consume responsibly. Also, as a brief note, we won't be focusing on the small print at the bottom of today's presentation. So that is simply a watermark. So I've had a wonderful introduction, but just to touch a little bit more on my journey, I am the founder and community building through communications strategist at Kissing Lions Public Relations. I'm a New York State Trauma-Informed Network and Resource Center Advisory Council member, and I'm also a consultant for the annual 2025 TINRC Summit taking place later this year. I wanted to also mention that I am a scholarship recipient for the op-ed project, Right to Change the World. And we making sure we're muting if there's any background sounds. So to jump into today's presentation, I'm going to share some examples. So I want to start with a question. How often do you ask yourself, how did I get here? Leaders, that question is for you. Within dominant caste supremacy culture, this question really matters. It is a question I'm frequently asked by people that recognize I've had an unusual life path. That question inspired this slide and will prepare us for concepts and solutions we'll discuss today. So in society, even as we face and navigate dominant caste supremacy culture and erosive, harmful policies that threaten our civil liberties, our expectations versus reality of survivors of violence are often very limited. So for this slide in particular, I'm going to share how I went from a vulnerable youth to working in the trauma-informed space. And if you all wouldn't mind muting, I can hear something in the background. So to further look at this slide, if you look in quadrant 1, which really is this time that I have experienced lots of memories similar to what you may have experienced that are positive, but I have also experienced life-changing violence and feral policing during childhood. Now, to further explain, that is witnessing and experiencing corporal punishment, physical harm, domestic violence, incest, severe cruelty, unpredictable caretakers for prolonged periods of time, things including colorism, suicide attempts in the household. And heading on to this second section of my life was really experiencing bullying in college, internalized forms of hatred, non-existent cultural belonging and mattering. And this was resulting in experiences such as burnout, anxiety, depression, PTSD, lack of self-care, lack of healthy boundaries and collective care, lack of heart-centered intervention, colorism, internalized self-hatred, hopelessness and being under-resourced, and experiencing silent violence. But headed over into quadrant 3, things are taking a change. A career of first that included a mix of mistakes and success. So as a public figure, I was exposed to dominant caste supremacy culture, anti-Black racism, fetishism and stalking, misogynoir, exclusion resulting in barriers to equal opportunity, humiliation, bullying, and gaslighting in creative industries. But ultimately, today's discussion is how we can turn all of these circumstances to becoming trauma-informed leaders or improving trauma-informed leadership models. In quadrant 4 here, you'll see transformational ancestral healing and heart-centered practices. I studied various modalities of well-being, including shamanism, Reiki, voice dialogue. I started my own independent consultancy. I joined the New York State Trauma-Informed Network and Resource Center as an advisory council member and became Tending the Roots and Voice Dialogue certified. So the idea here is that leaders, we need to send a message to the world that Black nervous systems matter. I had the honor of working as the director of creating resilient communities at Paces Connection previously, a nonprofit founded by author and journalist Jane Stevens. What a powerhouse. After my time at Paces Connection wrapped up, I wondered why Black nervous systems weren't as popular as the latest video game or sneaker trend within the Black community. To quote Jane, living with an alcoholic parent, racism, bullying, witnessing violence outside the home, physical abuse, and losing a parent to divorce have a huge risk of adult onset of chronic health problems such as heart disease, cancer, diabetes, suicide, and alcoholism. If we can adapt shared language to name what happened to us, we can change our future and rewrite a new ending to our story. So Jane's work as the founder of Paces Connection and a journalism platform called Aces Too High is centered on something referred to as Paces and resilience science. The science of Paces refers to the research about the stunning effect of positive and adverse childhood experiences and how they work together to affect our lives, as well as our organizations, systems, and communities. So this set of evidence-based research on toxic stress is also referred to as Paces and resilience science. And something I haven't been able to get out of my mind since then is movement making that transforms policy. That requires shared language. While we may often find ourselves unsure of practical steps to mitigate harm, learning about Paces and resilience science helped me to develop a trauma-informed lens on leadership and civic engagement. So oftentimes, the terms and jargon make people feel as if, I need to be a high-level academia. I need to study this for 10 years. That is actually not the case. So to further understand a few important terms, I've created this slide. Seen on the slide, important terms that define Paces and resilience science can be found. This is research that focuses on the short time, this is the research that we are able to share in the short time we have today. On one side of this slide, there are adversities, and on the other side, there are positive experiences. So there are adverse childhood experiences. This began with a CDC Kaiser study. This was groundbreaking, a public health study that discovered childhood trauma leads to the adult onset chronic diseases, depression, and other mental illness, violence, and being a victim of violence, as well as financial and social problems. Adverse community experiences became a focus after the initial study and includes impact population conditions. Examples include poverty, structural racism, community disinvestment, police violence, lacks of affordable housing, lack of opportunity and economic mobility, discrimination, disconnected relationships, unemployment, and deteriorating built environments. Additionally, adverse climate events, in other words, global warming, impact community conditions. Examples include COVID-19, climate change, wildfires, droughts, hurricanes, earthquakes, flood, environmental injustice, and pollution. And atrocious cultural experiences impact macro and socio-historical conditions. Examples include slavery, genocide, colonization, segregation, forced family separation, and other harmful social norms such as low sense of political and social efficacy and mistrust. But this is not meant to limit you or the constituents you serve. Positive childhood experiences are also evidence-based. Researchers started to examine the impact of PCEs on children and adults. So at PACE's Connection, there was a particular interest in the interplay between positive and adverse childhood experiences. And especially included for today's discussion, positive community experiences. A positive community thrives on traits such as trust, respect, collaboration, and inclusivity. It encourages open communication, shared goals, and mutual support among its members, fostering a sense of belonging and well-being. So now that we have those terms and jargon out of the way, let us continue today's discussion. As Jane Stevens uplifted, with shared terms and jargon about toxic stress, leaders, survivors, and advocates can work to prioritize trauma-informed education and organizing efforts for policy reform. But without the right terms and jargon about toxic stress, dominant caste supremacy culture will continue to divide the survivors of the transatlantic slave trade and people of African descent globally, and other peoples and communities as well. Until the descendants of the transatlantic slave trade incorporate trauma-informed practices, they won't be united. So I've got a question for you, and feel free to use the chat box. What would it be like for the descendants of the transatlantic slave trade to be united? During my time at PACE's Connection, programming explained that movement making is not about gatekeeping evidence, something that has been particularly oppressive for descendants of the transatlantic slave trade, to the extent we have internalized narratives rooted in dominant caste supremacy culture. So this slide is taking a look at the global opportunity to unify people of African descent through the evidence of PACEs and resilient science, and adapting a trauma-informed lens to leadership and organizational practices. So, as a note, understanding ways this research helps us understand things like toxic stress, racism, and social justice issues can support us through things like culture shock when we come from two different places, but we are still one diaspora, and things like cross-cultural relationship building. So to take a closer look at the slide, trauma-informed practices can enhance us on a personal level, with relationships, with our ability to practice self-care and process grief. We can have stigma-free trauma recovery, improve professional relationships, expand a sense of collective care, and trauma-informed leadership. We can reduce ACEs and increase PACEs. We can reduce maternal and infant mortality. Trauma-informed cooperative economics could really take off. So, scaling trauma-informed education and trauma-informed cooperative economics are a big part of this. You can see some duplicates, but you can also make some notes on what ways you foresee a trauma-informed lens can support your work. Trauma-informed leaders are the key to normalizing collective care and systems transformation. Globally, Black consumers hold significant spending power exceeding $2 trillion, according to estimates. This purchasing power is driven by a combination of factors, including increased cohort business ownership, population growth, educational attainment, and increased entrepreneurial activity. Unification is a form of liberation. So the right strategies can catalyze trauma-informed organizing and systems transformation. So somewhere along the way, survivorship, my background in branding, marketing, communications, and public relations, including as a storyteller, and my work in the trauma-informed space, important concepts began to surface. Communications and media relations can introduce large audiences to new ideas and persuade action. A wide range of disciplines can be used to introduce newsworthy, culturally focused storylines. And media literacy can play a major role in combating national and international bias in journalism and the stories we tell about the African diaspora. So I had to jump into creating. Community building through communications. This is a strategic roadmap for healing and repair. So through the community building through communications framework, local, national, and global communications can establish and develop its role in movement-focused community organizing, mobilization, and advocacy that aims to support impacted communities to own their own cultural narrative by creating equity, access, education, transparency, and policy reform grounded in trauma-informed awareness, trauma-informed practices, community-focused storytelling, and media literacy programming that acknowledges adversities and atrocities while uplifting culture and centering repair. So we've got a few slides left before we wrap up today's presentation. You are among the first to see this framework that I created to be utilized with communication strategies focused on human-focused and culturally relevant systems transformation. So you can see here a couple of things. Decolonizing research and analysis, that means no more gatekeepers. If we have experienced these adversities and atrocities, we deserve to understand the research. Trauma-informed SWOT. This stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, this may or may not translate, but here in the United States, something is trending called the call out. And corporations are terrified of being publicly called out. Well, this offers a call-in. This call-in is a listening tour and time to thoughtfully reflect as a group. In this framework also is planning, learning, and development. So we understand no matter how deep our experience in academia, we are forging new ideas, combining things in new ways that haven't been considered in this particular approach previously. Once we're clear on those steps, community training as a campaign is essential. And ultimately, to transform systems, as I learned from Jane Stevens, Ingrid Cochran, Danielle Prince, we must measure and track progress. So oftentimes, Black liberation is identified with being reactive. Well, this framework and set of strategies is a chance and opportunity to be proactive. So before we head to Q&A, this is a call to action. I invite you all to sign up for Tending the Roots instructor training, which follows the New York State Trauma-Informed Curriculum, and that is offered through the New York State Trauma-Informed Network and Resource Center. You can submit a workshop or talk or attend the 2025 annual TINRC Join the Journey Summit later this year in September. And you can create trauma-informed communities to invest in trauma-informed systems transformation. Don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, I'm happy to circle back to Q&A for any questions we may have received in the chat box. And you may want to, I can't think the sound is still connecting. And thank you. We're just taking a look through the live stream chat box to see your thoughts, any questions you might have. And please feel free to take a few moments to ground.
What a presentation. It was wonderful. Thank you so much, Keshana Evans, for sharing with us. You have provided us with deep insights on these approaches. Right now, let me see in the chat if we have some questions or comments.
Okay, great. And should I stop sharing the screen or should I leave the slide up?
So we have only a comment here. It is from the live. Community is so important. If people of African descent were units, have not the rates of ear death and disease would be lowered. We would also see a bug increase in younger generation thriving.
Absolutely. What I find, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
No, you can go. Sorry.
And thank you to our audiences. We are distributed globally presenting to you, so there may from time to time be a slight gap in the sound. Thank you for your patience.
I have a question for you, Keshana, after your comment. Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. Tell me, please, what are the key learnings NYSTINRC has provided on state level impact? And tell me, how can these approaches be scaled to generate meaningful change in broader communities?
This is a wonderful question. I want to first acknowledge Dr. Elizabeth Meeker, who is instrumental in creating the New York State Trauma-Informed Network and Resource Center. The impact is still being studied. However, vaguely speaking, and based on the public knowledge that is widely available, this effort has been able to create a Tending the Roots training. This is a free certificate training that is provided to anyone in New York City and anyone in New York State, but often other people from beyond those realms join these important trainings to learn about toxic stress and to adapt a trauma-informed lens to organizational policy. And these are often offered to staff, to leaders, and also to care providers of a wide variety of communities. They also have introduced a breathwork series to help educate people on the importance of grounding, breathwork, calming and soothing the nervous system. They also have been instrumental in creating a Join the Journey Summit. This Join the Journey Summit allows for people to come in, oftentimes offering free scholarships for those who would not normally be able to access these programs. And that weekend-long summit really examines through the trauma-informed lens, welcoming and embracing speakers that provide educational information and leadership on topics related to trauma-responsive practices, trauma-informed awareness, and related topics.
Great. Thank you so much for your answer. You talked about a seminar. Will it be live or presential?
Yes, so the Join the Journey event takes place in person in New York State. I had the pleasure of attending last year, and I want to share something with a little bit more transparency for today's very special audience. A part of my why for getting into the trauma-informed space is not only about myself. I have embarked on a journey of collective care that centers people of African descent, that centers sisterhood, but that also centers cross-cultural relationship building. And that to me is the real value I gained from attending Join the Journey last year in 2024. Dr. Elizabeth Meeker actually took the time out to work on her actual birthday to make sure that this experience was well received, supported, and it's her brainchild. So it was really powerful to be alongside her, experience this beautiful dynamic, and to be honest, to also see how this is received across cultural barriers. My why is also driven by my sadly estranged late sibling who was who's no longer with us and suffered a great deal as being richly melanated. This anti-Black racism is really, really pervasive, but I am 1000% confident that developing a trauma-informed lens and trauma-responsive practices can lead us to trauma-informed communities and leaders, trauma-informed organizations, trauma-informed districts, trauma-informed organizational policy, and systems transformation.
Great. Thank you so much, Teshana Evans, for your responses and for your presence. We also thank our audience for their participation and invite you to stay engaged in this conversation. We'll see you in 15 minutes again to address the second part of the side event presented by NGO Ubuntu S. Thanks for staying connected. See you in 15 minutes.
And thank you so much, Ubuntu S and
Thank you so
Onika.
much.
Thank you.
Goodbye. See you.
Is that okay?
It's okay. Yes, you can leave if you want it and go
Okay.
back after 15.
Okay.
Okay, just report. Sorry, just report. Eddie, ¿querías decir alguna cosa? Bueno, perfecto.
Do you need me for anything else?
Pues, Eddie, ella...